What is the correct order of the Narnia books? It's not an easy question to decide what order these books should be read in because there are three different orders that could be followed. There's the order of publication, the order of the completion of the writing of the books, and the order of the in-universe chronology. Let's take a look at each one of these, and then after that I'll talk about which one I prefer and why. The specific dates that I'll be referencing are from Wikipedia. The first Narnia book Lewis wrote was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which he completed in 1949 and published in 1950. This is the original book, the one about Lucy finding this passageway to another world where she and her siblings end up meeting Aslan, etc. Next, he wrote Prince Caspian, The Return to Narnia, which he completed at the end of 1949 and published in 1951. This is the original sequel in which the four Pevensey children return to Narnia, but they find that everything is different and Aslan is nowhere in sight. Next, we get The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Should we be pronouncing that Dawn Treader or the Dawn Treader? I don't know. Anyway, that was completed in 1950 and published in 1952. And this time, only the youngest two of the Pevensey children go to Narnia, and they're accompanied by a new character named Eustace Scrubb. And after that, this is when things start to get a little dicey, because the direct sequel to Dawn Treader was The Silver Chair, in which Eustace returns to Narnia with a new character named Jill. But that's not actually the next one he wrote. The Silver Chair was completed in 1951 and published in 1953. But the next one Lewis wrote was The Horse and His Boy, which he completed in mid-1950 but didn't publish until 1954, once The Silver Chair was completed and published as the proper sequel to Dawn Treader. The Horse and His Boy takes place during the events of the epilogue of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. While the Pevensey children were ruling in Narnia, this story takes place almost entirely in the land of Calormen to the south of Narnia. After that, the next book Lewis wrote was The Last Battle, which he finished in 1953, and which tells the story of the end of the world of Narnia. And we get to see all of our favorite characters again, and then the entire world is destroyed and everybody goes on to Narnian heaven, or to Aslan's country as it's called. So about as much of a hard stop kind of ending as you could ask for in this series, and it makes perfect sense that he waited to publish it until last in 1956. But the last book he wrote was his timeless prequel, The Magician's Nephew, which he finished in 1954 and published in 1955. And this really throws a monkey wrench into things, because this book takes place 5 decades before the Wardrobe story and shows us the origin of about 1 billion things in the Narnian saga. So for the chronological order, things are just completely different. We would start with The Magician's Nephew, in which Diggory Kirke is a little boy, and then we would go on to the Wardrobe story, in which Diggory is the elderly professor. And then we get the 3 direct sequels connected with King Caspian, but before those we would have the story of Shasta, which includes a brief meeting with the Pevensey children back when they were adults, back before they became kids again for the book Prince Caspian. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. And then, of course, we would finish off with The Last Battle. So what order should you read the books in? I think each of the 3 sequences here definitely has a case that can be made for it. One of the benefits to reading them in the publication order is that you can follow the Pevensey children and the various character transitions as each character set makes a gradual adjustment for the sequel that follows it. So you keep meeting people from previous books really all the way through the series. The only book you would start off without knowing any of its characters would be the first one. And for the first 3 proper sequels in the series, for each of those, the central cast of characters always includes people you've gotten to know in the previous book. Another benefit to this order would be that you'd begin with the most popular and well-known title, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. C.S. Lewis himself, however, suggested that there is a certain kind of logic to reading them in chronological order, starting with The Magician's Nephew. This allows you to enter the Narnian saga like a historian or like a chronicler of Narnia, putting together the timeline in your mind as you go, one piece of development at a time. One of the drawbacks to this approach is that the narrator in The Magician's Nephew seems to remember the Wardrobe story even though it didn't happen yet, and seems to think the reader does too. And needless to say, the narrator in The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe doesn't seem capable of returning the favor. But I think one of the strongest reasons to read the books in chronological order is because it allows you to start with Lewis's final book written, and I think the quality tends to improve as the series goes on, with the last 3 books he wrote containing the highest quality in the series, in terms of the sophistication of the messaging, the sense of realism, and the overall feeling of weightiness and depth. I think inserting the last written book into the beginning is a way to allow Lewis to put his best foot forward. And I would also argue that the popularity of The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe may actually make it a less effective starting place simply because it's been repackaged into movies and other pop culture phenomena so many times. So a new reader, for example, may have already watched film adaptations or heard parts of the story, and this may overshadow their ability to appreciate the book for what it is. Now, one of the drawbacks to the chronological order of reading is that it is a bit awkward to insert The Horse and His Boy in between the two stories about the four Pevensey children. Now, I'm always eager to hang out with Shasta and Erebus and take a journey with them to Tashban any old day of the week. But needless to say, it's obviously not the sequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think that whichever order you read the books in, I think each of the three timelines contains some really important information about the way the Narnia saga works. I think each order contains important information that makes thinking about Narnia all that much more interesting. And why not try all three orders, one after another? Find out which one you like the best. And as far as which book to read that very first time for a complete beginner, maybe the best piece of advice might actually be to start with the book you think would actually interest you the most. For example, for myself, I totally love The Silver Chair, and I honestly think that journeying to the underworld with Puddleglum and Eustace and Jill would be a great introduction to Narnia for somebody like me, even if you never heard of Eustace or Aslan or King Caspian, because most good stories can stand alone after all. Maybe we don't need to work quite so hard to find the perfect first book that will apply for every beginning reader. Maybe any book could do it, and maybe there are other things that are actually going to be more important. I think it's probably a lot more important that a new reader has a general idea of what they're getting into, that this is children's fantasy from the 1950s, and that its laid-back conversational style is going to be nothing remotely like Disney action-adventure films. And also that the best way to enjoy these kinds of books is to relax, to really take your time, to use some imagination, and to really make sure that you're going to take time to reflect on what you read. I suspect that those are the kind of factors that are really going to make the most difference on somebody's first impression, rather than which book they actually read first. Anyway, let's all go read some Narnia.